everyone, and welcome to this year's DynamicsCon. I thank you for the opportunity to let me speak here. This session is the Road to BC Development. This is intended to be a roadmap, a basic guide to what are the things that you need to know to be proficient in Business Central development with Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. If you haven't met me before, I'm Jeremy Vyska. I'm the CEO of Spare-Brained Ideas. You can find my socials in the corner. I am a consultant, developer, trainer, author, done just about everything across 20 years, and most recently received the MVP for Business Central. So let's dive in. So to look at where we are going forward, it always helps to understand where we came from, because you're going to be working with customers and partners who have worked with the old ways and a lot of different things. So the old partner flow, we typically had a sales and marketing team who would identify a customer who had product needs that, at the time, Navision, eventually Microsoft Business Solutions NAV and Dynamics NAV, this product was a good fit for them. And they would hand that client off to a project manager, and the project manager would work with a consultant who would be the implementer, who would find all the gaps, the challenges, the things that need to be adjusted to make it just the right fit. And so as developers, we were sort of tailors. We didn't write, generally speaking, whole new parts of the system. We adjusted all the little fits to make sure everything was right. For some scenarios, you would have entirely new products, in which case we would replace the project manager with a product manager. And then eventually the project would complete or the product would release and it would go off to support. That was roughly the old flow. As you'll notice that there's not a lot of infrastructure needs to the old flow. IT was something that was an IT responsibility. And that's important to understand because the responsibilities with Business Central have evolved a little bit. We still have sales and project management and product management and implementation teams, and they're still vital. They're still doing a great job within the space. There are many ways that Business Central is making it easier for some of these implementations to cut out some of the more complicated parts of the onboarding process, and it's going in good directions. But to understand the development model, there's a variety of new responsibilities that have been added over time to the development team. Now that we're using the development environment in Business Central, we have the ability to use and responsibility to use Git and branching, source control of things. We also have telemetry and CI/CD and pipelines and Azure integrations and testability and architecture considerations, and maybe you have to do on-prem administrative tasks, and you also have to think about the cloud environment. What is a tenant? There's a lot of technology responsibility that is required to help with customers, to help with product development, with deployment. And there hasn't traditionally been a single sole responsible person to adopt those technology demands. So part of becoming a Business Central developer in the modern world is that you're not just producing code, you're not just producing solutions, you're also the technologist, the person who is helping understand all the integrations and the different pieces. And that's why when you look around and you find a lot of the training courses and training materials and blogs and all these different things, you'll only sometimes find that they're specifically code related. They're often about technology, and that's because developers have to be technologists as well. So that's important to think about as we're going through today. And as we go through today, we are going to talk about how do you get started. We are going to talk about then, once you've got that foundation stone, how do you get better? And how do you get great? What does a great developer, technologist type person look like? And how do you keep up beyond that? So things you're going to want to have for this particular journey that you're setting out on, if you're watching this, is it would be best if you're open to always learning new things. You don't have to be the person who wants to be on the cutting or bleeding edge, depending on your feel about it. You don't have to be that person. There is so much learned knowledge that you can acquire over time that will always be relevant. The way that the application itself has evolved over time, but there is still great value in understanding some of the core functionality exactly as it was written 20 years ago. Those things are still all relevant, so you will always have a place. I have good friends who learned all about RDLC reporting and the way that the reporting engine works when it was brand new in 2009, and they still find immense value to that. But there is also great opportunity to continuously learn new tech. So be thinking about what sort of new things are coming out that you would enjoy learning, because there's always going to be more opportunity, and there will always be asks, hey, can you please take this on for us? The other thing that you're going to need to have in your tank for this journey, and this one is a contentious challenge for many organizations, is you're going to need time. The problem with time is that we often in our industry have so much to do and so many big goals and demands on the things that must be done that we're always focusing on getting the results immediately. And if you think about it like this, you're trying to become a great football player, but you're only going out on the field when it's match time, when it's with the customer, when it's with the product. Can you imagine trying to only get your training through actual games? No, and you wouldn't expect to get good results if you were asking someone to do that. So it is very, very important for you as an individual, but it's also important for organizations that you work for to allocate time for improvement. There have been so great many examples of moments where I talked to somebody, showed them around a great tip, and they said, oh man, I wish I knew that months ago. It would have saved me weeks. And the tip would have taken 5 minutes to find out from a YouTube channel. So there's a lot of value to slowing down here and there. You don't have to aim for the mythical wonder world of the 20% time that you are going to devote to learning new things, but try to make sure that your organization is open to the fact that when a customer asks you, hey, we need to implement this data synchronization with Dataverse or a Logic app, you've had an opportunity to even look at what a Logic app is. You might not know right now. So it is very important for organizations to be supportive of that. So budding developers, if you're being asked to do a lot of things, you're welcome to quote me on that. So let's talk about getting started. There are a lot of different learning sources, and this can almost be overwhelming with how many there are. I am absolutely going to do links at the end, as I've done in previous sessions, so don't worry. We are talking about many different places that you can find boot camps and classes. There are great trainers in our industry today who have made it their passion, their lifelong pursuit to help people get started with development in this space. It is something that you absolutely should locate those people. You will save yourself months of heartache by spending a week, or maybe some of the boot camps that are out there that are even longer than a week. They'll still cut so much time off of your ramp up time. If you're an organization that's trying to start someone out new with Business Central development, ideally you would love to see them be fully functional in that 6 months or 12 months or whatever vision you have in your head. Honestly, a boot camp will get them there faster. You want those booster rockets to be clamped onto people. Separately, if you're an experienced developer, one of the other things that you're going to run into is what I run into all the time, which is there are rookie classes for getting started, and then there are deep dive technical courses. And you'll find that many of the deep dive technical courses cover about 60 or 80 or even 90% all things you know, but you would have never found out that last little 10% without having been told that. You are always going to find that there are gaps in your knowledge to be filled. So, if you want to really understand how can I code an extension or develop a product so that it is maximum performance, or I need to understand how to connect an API connector to my Business Central system on-prem, there are great classes in those things. You should be taking them. If you're a developer learning how to do reporting and analysis work, you probably should take some introductory classes to some of the Power BI tools, so that way you understand what Power BI people are going to need to get out of the system. There are classes in all these things. They're going to have relevance. Additionally, one of the things that many developers run into is they talk about, I've learned all these great techniques and I've learned all these tools and I understand how to do all these wonderful things in code, but they don't really know all the parts of the application. And we're programming against a very, very rich application that has so many areas of functionality. Most even seasoned developers, I will come across many areas of the product that they've never looked at because there's no reason to do development in those spaces. They're already very strong. This tends to come up with things like account schedules and a lot of the core financial parts of the product. They often don't require significant customization outside of product development. So many developers never learn how to build an account schedule. It's valuable to understand all of these core concepts so that when someone asks you about, say, for example, can I connect a purchase order line and a sales order line? I want to have those dates connected. You can have a conversation of, why aren't we using order promising or drop shipments or reservations to better connect those things rather than developing our own solution? And for that, this is why I bring up Microsoft Learn. They have a lot of great learning paths that are introductions to core modules, and it's valuable to pay attention to even those intro level courses so that when you're asked to do something, you can go, there is functionality in this area, please explain to me the difference, and you'll make a better result for it. And they also have deep dive technical things for complicated subjects. For example, I was looking at one earlier today that was about connecting the Power Platform. It was pretty thorough. I liked it a lot. So don't discount the official source on this. Some of them are intro, but intro can be very valuable. Additionally, there are books in the industry. I know many people don't learn their best from books. That happens, understand, sure. But many of the books that are in the industry are specifically written by professionals for professionals. There are far more books about application development and implementation methodologies and understanding the ecosystem of Business Central than there are books for the end user, for how to use the system. Eric Hugard and myself are some of the only folks I know of who've written end user specific training technology books, and those are great for understanding how to use the system. So I would encourage you to take a look at those resources. And then of course there are so many blogs. I'm a huge advocate of that, and we'll talk more about blogs towards the end of the session about how to keep up. But bear that in mind, that there's a lot of wisdom in there. For example, a lot of great consultants do practical Q&As of how to do basic operations. Matthew Perrin just did a great series on intercompany posting, which a lot of developers have not worked with. But, in the past year, I've had to do intercompany transactions for cash receiving. Without knowing what intercompany postings could do, would I have presented the best solution or asked the right questions to understand it? No. So you got to pay attention to some of the different resources that are out there. For getting started with development, actually coding your first little hello world, you're going to need some tools, obviously. The first is you're going to need Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is the free download environment, a downloadable environment to write code in. It is instantly usable with one small exception. You'll have to install an extension into Visual Studio Code, the AL extension that Microsoft releases, which enables all of the connectivity to Business Central. It enables a lot more than just the basic deploy to Business Central, but it is the key to your getting started. Speaking of which, you'll need some sort of Business Central environment. There are two main paths to how do you get a Business Central environment. The easiest way to have a play space to work with in Business Central is to have one of the official environments from Microsoft in the cloud. There are ways that you can, well, I mean, for starters, you can just get a one-user license and use it for yourself as a trial. If you are a partner or working with a partner, you can build entire demonstration environments that will be the complete Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem, including Office 365 and Azure and Power Platform. That is probably one of the best options if you need a play space where you're going to be doing things outside of Business Central as well. I've certainly learned a lot hooking up logic apps through Business Central in one of these play spaces. For partners, those are available for free. I believe the site these days is called Transform, but we'll definitely have that in the links in the resources. Many developers, however, also need to have what I would almost refer to as a disposable, easy to build, easy to throw away environment where they can test out new tech and they can test it in a clean space. And to do that, if you haven't heard of it before, Docker is the way that many developers are working. This is a virtual machine environment where you can spin up new instances of Business Central using PowerShell commands from BC Container Helper, which is one of the tools that is released into the community by Microsoft. Freddie put that together. I'm thinking along with some other help, but definitely essential to getting Business Central environments with one or two simple PowerShell commands up and running, and now you've got a fully usable Business Central environment of almost any version. This is used heavily in pipelines and testability, so we're going to be talking about it more. There's benefit to using and knowing how to do both, so you're going to want to learn both. For getting better, now we're starting getting into the real meat of what many NAV developers coming up into Business Central are still struggling with themselves. So you're not going to be alone in your path of learning. Visual Studio Code extensions they're the best. The old development environment in NAV is an old friend for sure, but now we have the ability to retool the tools we use, and there are phenomenal extensions for Visual Studio Code Business Central development. It can be a little bit tricky that you have to install extensions to do the best job of building extensions, but it is true. There is, for example, a fantastic series of webinars that was done last year on the Aeropa YouTube channel. It's available now. The webinars were 15 to 20 minutes each. There are 4 hours of those of interviews with the people who made these different Visual Studio Code extensions, showing how they work, what the goal was, and how they save you time. For example, I know that there is a great tool that allows you to, when you're opening a page, the UI, to add new fields to it. There's a code action you can run, and then tick, 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 you can just check the boxes of what fields you want to add to the page. You don't have to type it all out. Saves you hours. Very, very quickly will save you hours. So you definitely want to learn about them. Additionally, this transitions us from efficiency gains to also thinking about long-term effectiveness. Snippets save you time in typing. They're often introduced by the Visual Studio Code extensions that are made by the community, but there are some built into the AL extension Microsoft releases itself. Those are templated blocks of code. Saves you lots of typing. it's hard to get into the habit of using them, but as you get into the habit of using them, you will save yourself time. And I know some MVPs are still on that learning path themselves. And then separately, we also have patterns. There is going to be a great session later this con from Waldo talking about community-built patterns, and that is design best practices. Best practices that are tailored to the idea of making the environments consistent for multiple developers to work with each other in a uniform way, to make things more performance friendly, to do things in the most performative friendly way, because after all, a solution that works great for just you might not work so great when it's put in front of 200 users on the cloud ecosystem. Then also there's maintainability over time. When code obsoletes, if you've done things following patterns, there are usually great ways to convert those pieces of patterns. So it's important to understand that it's about long-term effectiveness as well, and interpersonal effectiveness. You don't have to read the code quite so hard if you're following the right patterns. And then, of course, community resources. I did an entire session on that last year, so I won't spend very much time on that here. Most of those are still in place. There are great Yammer groups. There are great user groups, such as Dynamics User Group. There are great forums. There's Discord. There's fantastic resources on Twitter. Be sociable, reach out to people, connect with people. You will find there are so many people who are willing to just help you out. Maybe you're stuck just trying to figure out, I can't figure out why this report, I can't get this one field to show up. I've seen people hop into Teams calls to just say, hey, let me look at it with you. 5 minutes of my time might save you 5 hours. Let's do it. And then, after you get effective within yourself, you also need to start getting better about how you work with others. And this comes into some of the things like source control. For those of you who have not worked in development before, or you've been working with NAV for a long time, but Business Central is new to you, we finally have the ability to natively use source control. So there is GitHubs, there's Azure DevOps, there's GitLabs, there's many other different tools that are in the environment. You need to understand the core concepts of what the Git ecosystem or whatever source control your organization has chosen to use. You need to understand it, because those tools can really power your abilities up on how do we effectively maintain code over time. And then additionally, you need to understand next level up from source control is source control. Most of them use branching. Well, when most of the questions that I got from seasoned people last year is, I don't know, I'm working with multiple developers. We've got a list of 100 different moving parts that are waiting for approvals by 20 different people. How do we make sure that we've got this one extension with all these different moving parts? How do we keep that all in order? How do we keep those different things in the right way? So as a BC developer / technologist, you're going to need to understand what are the different options for source control branching strategies, and how do you manage those different options. You'll need to understand the whys, the pros and cons of those different things. And last but not least, I'll mention CI/CD pipelines. They're an important part of building the application itself for deployment, for user acceptance testing, and they are a foundation stone that we're going to build on in our next section when we talk a little bit more about lifecycle. CI/CD pipelines, continuous integration, continuous deployment, if I recall the acronym correctly. It's all about having the engines of your source control help you build the applications, to run testing against those applications, and to do the work of deploying them or building them or creating the final product for you. And this is something that you need to have a foundational understanding of to go into the next sequence of things. Which, speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about getting great. So, This next little section is going to be a little controversial because of the fact that many of the things that I'm going to mention in this section, you could absolutely make a case for. You should be aware of these things. You should know how these work right from day one. Absolutely. In a perfect world, everyone would know all of this stuff from day one, but you got to start somewhere. So there's a little bit of controversy in putting these things up in this tier. So be aware of that. And not all of this is going to be linear learning. So some of these things are going to be things that you will learn week one, because maybe your organization has already adopted some of these things and you'll get to work with them right away. That's a good thing. Don't worry about it. So first of all, many organizations have still not really started their voyage with telemetry yet. There are numerous sessions that have been phenomenal put on in the community. Some great free tools put out there for telemetry. What is it? It's the ability for Business Central to phone home and share information about how things are working. Not the data itself, because GDPR, it's very compliant with all those things, but about how things work and how things are being used. There are telemetry uses for understanding how the extension is being deployed. For example, you can get telemetry about who out there in the world is using your application. If you were doing product development, you would really love to know what regions have people been installing trial versions of your application. If you were supporting multiple customers using the same extension, can you run a Power BI dashboard real quick to see who's on which version because you've just identified a bug in one of the older versions and know how to reach out to the customers that have the older version? These are valuable. Think about how powerful it would be if you're a developer working in an organization, you've released a new app on AppSource that has 12 areas of product functionality in this extension, and you could give your executive team and your sales team detailed insights into, well, 4 of the product areas are in use at every single customer, 5 areas of this have not been in use anywhere, and 3 of the areas, anytime someone goes to use it, they get error messages, but you've never gotten a support phone call for it. That sort of thing is the tools that you can get out of this telemetry system. There's so much information available that you can pull into your organization and own the understanding of the whole product. To make it work, you're also going to need to start developing some of your Azure knowledge. Azure is its own ecosystem. There's a lot of things about managing app registrations and understanding the data stores and secret key vaults and all these different moving parts of the Azure portal. And if your customer is using some of the technologies like, some of the synchronizations with Dataverse, if they're using email integrations, if they're using on-prem and they're doing Azure Active Directory single sign-on, these are all technologies around Azure that many Azure people don't know anything about Business Central, so you're going to have to be the person to be the technology wizard who helps them understand, what do I need to do next? And even if you don't do the work yourself and you're just asked to give those instructions to an IT person, you still need to know where to find the info. Speaking of connecting to some of the other parts of the ecosystem, it's also really good to understand Power Platform. Even if you're not an expert in Power Platform yourself, you should understand the basics of Power BI. You should understand what is a logic app. You should know about Power Automate flows. Those are things that your customers are going to find great value in all those different parts. And you should at least know some of the basics of each of them, because you are going to find there are great experts in Power BI and Power Platform and all of those different components that fall under this umbrella, but they don't always necessarily know about how do I connect these things with Business Central. So it helps a great deal for you to be ready to go, okay, when I work with Power BI people, this is the sort of information they're pulling out of the system, so I should know these are the kind of queries that they might need to have, and you'll be able to give them better data. And on top of connecting to Azure and Power Platform, there is a whole world of stuff with connecting all these things up under the hood with Dataverse. There are many, many customers that are making use of the whole Dynamics 365 platform, and folks are going to want to make use of the customer engagement area. And it makes all the sense in the world to want to be able to do synchronization. Well, if someone asks you, you need to add some custom fields to the contact in both systems, you have to know all the mechanics of how Dataverse works to be able to do those different synchronization pieces. Some AL coding, sure, but it's more about the technology, so you're going to need to learn all of that. And then, of course, there's all of the environmental administration considerations. You are going to be asked, well, can we make a new sandbox? Well, how do we deploy a new tenant? How do we onboard new customers? My users are getting an error message and it's something to do with licensing. How do we manage all those parts? And oftentimes, if you're working at a partner organization, you're going to get people who are coming up from NAV or have business needs that force them to run on-prem, or they've just chosen due to corporate policies to run on-prem. You're going to need to know about PowerShell, and you're going to need to know how do you do different services, how do you connect things up to SQL, how do you do all of these integration pieces, how do you expose the API. So there's lots there you're going to have to learn about as well. And this is probably one of the biggest controversial points of being high up in the top tier here, testability. Testability is all about the idea of proactive and reactive thinking. Proactive testability is all about making testing code units that test all the different permutations that you as a product team can think of, that you want to make sure those scenarios functionally work. Reactive testability is your customer has discovered a bug or an issue with a customization you've done. You can use testability to make test scenarios that then ensure you never make that mistake again. For those of you who have been with long-term partners, for example, you probably know, or hopefully do know, that the most sincere form of apology is to promise and mean it and deliver on it that it will never happen again. Reactive testability means that any issues that you inadvertently cause a customer, you can sincerely and mean it promise that you can ensure that code will always meet that requirement. This couples with the source control and the CI/CD pipelines, because all of these things that you build in testability can be run automatically when you check in code. They can be run before you deploy. It's very, very important to understand the value of that right from the beginning of the cycle. So strongly encourage you to learn about it. You're also going to be asked all sorts of architectural considerations that are often performance-based, or they're about how to separate out different parts of a solution. Should we build one monolith PTE, per tenant extension, or should we break it up into different modules? We might want this functionality for another customer. So how do we architect this? How do we support this in the long term? Many customers want a PTE that's just one big thing, and then other times you need to divide it up. You need to understand what are the pros and cons of that. There are performance implications that you're going to have to think about. And if it's going into a cloud environment where they have many ISV solutions, there might be negative interactions that you are not anticipating and that you're going to have to solve through architectural design. And if you're building product, that's almost double. You're going to have to think about the fact that many of the customers that are using your solution, you may never interact with them. You may never get to know who they are. So it is important for you to be able to understand, how do we make the products be very reliable? How do we give useful error messages? There are ways that you can present through patterns, good setup warnings, preview postings, all sorts of different considerations that are best practice that a product manager hopefully knows, but you need to make sure you're able to champion and say, hey, we could do this a better way through a notification to the user during the creation of a new customer, for example. There are many things you should be thinking about. So Then, of course, there's keeping up. What are the ways that you're going to need to keep up with this ecosystem? There are 2 major releases every year. That is a pretty fast tempo, and you will see that some of the older folks in the industry, based on experience, not age, are definitely challenged by this because pre-Business Central, the tempo was a little slower. Now we're on a treadmill going quick. So one of the most important places to keep an eye on, the official roadmap. Sometimes it's just overview and you might not see all the major implications and great things in detail there, but it's important to look at all of them and go, do I know at least roughly what this is about? For example, the release that's upcoming, I'm pretty excited to play with the Excel functionality that'll let us do Excel template reporting. That's going to potentially be a very big deal for a number of my customers. But it's on the official roadmap, so I know to watch out for that and to learn, because there's going to be lots of opportunities to engage with the BC team and find out more about it. I've backed a variety of small indie projects on Kickstarter, like little games that are built by one person, and they hop on Discord and chitter chatter with you. We almost get that level of engagement with the BC team. That's from the Microsoft ecosystem, one of the biggest companies in the world. Our product team is that invested, that engaged. I've seen them do great threads on Twitter that talked about performance implications on a Saturday morning. And there's a little bit of like, guys, I'm glad for the passion, work-life balance. It's okay. Speaking of which, social networking. There are fantastic Twitter lists to be following to keep up with all these things. You definitely should pay attention to them. And there are so many blogs and newsletters. For example, on the Sparebrained Ideas site, you'll find that there is a newsletter engine. I run it for free. And it's non-commercial, that just does a roundup every day or every week of, I think it's up to 150 different blogs. And anytime those blogs post something new, you get an email about it on the schedule you asked for. And that way you can keep up without having to check all those different places. And importantly, it's not just good enough to learn yourself. One of the biggest values you can do is to help others. One of the common things that I see people do in our industry is they go, oh, well, other people already have talked about this. Well, that's probably true, but it's still your voice. The story's been told before. The product has existed for a long time, but many people, I tell them about a part of the system that's been in the product since version 1. They didn't know. So, and also people explain things in different ways. They land in different ways. They can give an aha moment just phrased slightly differently. So it doesn't matter if it's something that someone has already covered before. Get up there, get onto Twitter or onto a blog. I've got a great video about how to build a blog for free using GitHub. Go do that. Hop onto LinkedIn. Do posts about just, hey, did you know you can undo a shipment? It's easy. It's right here. That's going to help somebody. And so many of the people that are in the industry today are glad to give that help. You'll get it. You'll pass it on to other people. Pay that forward. It'll make a big difference. And after all, what's the best way to learn things? Teach it. Not everyone can, so I will understand that. But if you can, it is absolutely wonderful to do. There's great value in it. So, wrapping things up a little bit, just to give that nice summary of everything, we have the boot camps, we have Microsoft Learn, there are books out there. You're going to need your Visual Studio Code environment. You're going to want to have an understanding of Docker and how to build demonstration BC environments, and that'll get you at least started. And then you really got to get efficient by learning what extensions can give you in the Visual Studio Code environment. By using patterns, you are being a good actor within the space. Henrik loves to say, you are never the last person to look at your own code. So the best thing you can do is to be a good citizen in the space and understand the reasons behind a lot of the patterns, to use them, to spread them, to encourage your organization to do code reviews and adhere to them. Connect to the community, understand the value of source control, branches, pipelines, all that. And then this gets into the trickiest parts. There's lots of technology. Telemetry is important. Power Platform is important. Azure and Dataverse, there's a big demand for understanding that. You're going to need to understand some degree of IT administration to manage environments. And as soon as you can, get involved in testability. I would love to see that in day one for people, but I know that's a challenge. Architecture and product considerations, understanding the implications of your design decision. Many of these solutions will exist for 10 years, so think about what that looks like. And there are going to be lots and lots of links and resources up on our site, which you can find here at sparebrain.com/devroadmap. You will find there are links for all of these different sections to so many different things. And as a last final thing, we are going to be doing a Q&A session for about 10 minutes or so after this talk. So I will be pleased as punch to hopefully hear from some of you in the chat about what other things that you would imagine that a developer should add to these road lists, to the roadmap. What are things that you would see in tier 1, 2, and 3 that we didn't cover that you would love to see us add to this resource list? I'm not perfect. There's always more stuff to be added to this. So I hope you'll all join me, and I hope you had a good voyage, and this will be of great value to you and your team. Take care. Hello, everybody. Well, I hope that was a useful tour for you. I know a lot of people were looking for links to some of the different resources, and there were so many links. So I have shared that there is the sparebrain.com /dev roadmap. I'll leave that up forever. And that has all of the links to the different resources that we've talked about today, with lots more on top of that. And that includes, for example, the newsletter link for the emails about different blogs and that sort of thing. There isn't a book list. I saw there was a question about, is there a book list on alguidelines.dev? And there should be. That would be really cool if there was a collected resource list of all the different industries. So we'll be adding that to the to-do pile. Let's see. I don't think that there were a whole lot of other questions. There was a couple of SAS about, is there any code in this session? No, there is not. One of the things I did not cover in detail that I think is going to be a question for some of the people viewing this later is we didn't actually talk about what do you need to learn to work with the programming language, like to work with AL itself. And I just wanted to kind of address that. There is, in the links, there's a great set of different boot camps out there. And there is one of the offerings, Business Central Booster, has a fantastic website that kind of breaks down all of the different things they consider to be a minimum viable developer. So I would encourage you to check that out. There's also a Microsoft list of, sorry, some people are saying the link is down, which is awesome. I'll check that out in just a moment. It seems to be fine. Steve has the resource list, which has way beyond what I've linked. That link is on that page as well. Excellent. All right, you guys stampeded the site. Excellent. Hopefully that'll come back online shortly. There is a lot of caching involved, so it'll work well. But yeah, so I didn't see a whole lot of questions. One of the questions was, do you need a full dev license to create extensions in BC? I believe that there are some areas of the system that you can create extensions without a developer license. However, it costs nothing to spin up an organization as a partner and request the publisher agreement, and that will give you access to having a developer license. So I think that's probably the way you want to go there. Is just to sign up, and that I'll add that to the resource links because that's actually a really good one. However, on the SpareBrain YouTube channel, I have a session called From AL to App Source, and the very first part of that session, where we take a custom extension, I walk through the whole process of what do you need as a partner to have to take your custom extension, get onto AppSource, and that includes the process of signing up as a partner to producing the registration agreements that you need to have and all that sort of thing. So for getting a demo to play with, that one's a popular question. If you are not a partner, your best bet is to grab Docker Desktop. Again, that's at the resource links. Set up Docker Desktop, and you can download basically these virtual images that allow you to run a full-fledged Business Central demo environment. And you can choose different versions. You can choose if you want that Docker image to be cloud-based or on-prem based. And that's also how you can preview upcoming versions of Business Central, like version 20 will be due out soon. So Docker Desktop is probably your best bet to get a demo site to play with if you are going to be doing your own development work, making changes. Otherwise, if you are with a partner, you can also go to the CDX Transform website. I think it's just cdx.partner. I've got a, again, link in the /dev roadmap. All of those are in there. And that will get you to being able to spin up a demonstration environment that is the entire ecosystem. You get an Azure environment, you get an Office environment, you get Power Platform, so that way you can test the whole ecosystem working together. Whereas if you do Docker virtual machines, then those are just the Business Central component. So it depends on what parts that you're going to need to play with. I find it very valuable to plan as an organization to have a test environment stack with all those different parts. And then when I need to test things just for me, I use Docker environments for my own testing and playing with. If you are looking to just get an environment set up and spun up, you can also sign up to trial versions of Business Central and just give them a try in that way. Let's see. There is a question about, there's not a lot of info about how to set up pipelines and learn about CI, CD, etc. One of the newer things that is coming out, I believe shortly, Microsoft is creating a GitHub repo to allow you to use GitHub and to use their solution for free to create a basic pipeline flow. So I will make sure that that is in the link set as well. I'm going to keep updating all of the stuff. But that's a great place to start out, is the GitHub side of things. And if that doesn't work for you, you're a DevOps organization, there are resources from Freddie. Freddie's blog is a good place to go to for that. And there have definitely been some good presentations around some of the pieces. Okay, well, let's see. I think that answers most of the questions. There are a few articles that are on the sparebrain.com site that I would recommend you take a look at if you're a new developer. I did a post talking about the challenge of Dr. Cal and Mr. Ale, because Business Central is kind of a two-language system, and we still see echoes of that today. So that's some things you might want to take a look at as well. and lots of good links in the chat. So thank you everyone for sharing additional resources. I hope this helps you get going. And if you have more topics for me to babble about in a little more detail, I'll be happy to help. Just hit me up on social. Take care, everybody, and I hope you have a good day.